I think I speak for everybody when I say that we really appreciate the humor involved and how it came from two different voices. It's so interesting. And Aaron, I liked the tension in your work that I sensed about how we feel versus how we're supposed to feel. I kind of got that out of your work.
Yeah, the Skin on Man.
What is it?
The film that you referenced.
What film? No, sorry.
Was it? Wasn't that an Afterlife movie with Racine Ritchie?
Sorry.
Jacob's Ladder? Was it Diabolical?
No. No.
Tigger movie! We're just throwing movies out. American Pie.
There's any movies. All movies.
We're going to find out.
Yeah, somebody will guess it. Somebody, right? Anybody have any questions? No?
Yes, questions.
No questions?
More questions.
You can ask me anything. I will make up answers.
I have a question, but I forgot what it was though. It was I know. It was actually for Anja, who is of course trying to tell
That's all right.
I just wanted to know if you could, maybe if you guys could still pass the mic around for the people in the back. You're a really super excellent visual artist too, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your visual art.
Sure. I was trained to be a visual artist. My mom over there, she studied art and was a grade school art teacher, and I still think of myself as an artist first. But even when I was just an artist, I was never just an artist. I was very much a storyteller who happened to be an artist. I don't know, I'm a chameleon. But my work got progressively more and more narrative to the point where when I moved back to Milwaukee, I started volunteering at this nonprofit, the Milwaukee Artist Resource Network, and they needed someone to run the literature group that meets up and critiques work and stuff. And the executive director was like, "Anja, can you just do that? Because I know you do writing sometimes." And I was like, yeah, I do. And it seems like the longer I live in Milwaukee, there's so many visual artists. It's like I just feel needed as a writer, and I'm okay with that. But it's funny because I still think of myself as a visual artist first, but I definitely see myself morphing into the world of being a writer. And for a really long time, I felt like a con artist as a writer, because I would be in public and all of a sudden, like, the former poet laureate of Milwaukee would come up and be like, "Write me a poem." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, I'll do it. Help." But I did it, and yeah, I'm a multidisciplinary person, and I'll just leave it at that.
And you can see some of her work on Libraries Incubator Project. She wrote a really fantastic series for us about her process, and it comes with lots of fun visuals. Question?
Yeah, I want to ask the simplest question. Do you have, of your own work, a favorite poem, something that you've always felt resonated more than anything else you've written and revealed you?
Yeah. No. Yeah, as in, I understand what you have just asked me. I don't know. I think my favorite poem is always the thing that I'm working on, because it's so possible, and then it's done, and it's not what I wanted it to be. You know, like, that's just how it goes. I do think that once you are writing a lot or making a lot of work, no matter what you're making, the amount of work you put in kind of like buys you these gifts that you don't know where they come from, and you don't know when they're gonna come. And I've had 2 poems that were gift poems where they just like fell out of me onto the page, like the classic, completely incorrect idea of like the writer sitting down and like writing this perfect thing start to finish. Like only 2 poems have ever even approached that for me. And I read one of them tonight. Allegheny Love Letter was a gift poem, but it happened at the end of a summer during which I wrote 50 poems in 50 days. So, you know, like I paid it forward to that. And so I still have like this thing where I read that poem and it's still kind of miraculous to me. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? I didn't even try. And it happened, you know, so maybe that one still.
That resonates the most with me? I, at this point, have poems that resonate with a younger version of myself. That book of poetry has a lot of younger me. Probably the Waterfall poem. And it's kind of a mashup of a bunch of different poems I wrote at one point that I just all of a sudden realized came together. And that's something that's always really fun for me, is that I'll write a lot of poems, and I'll write them really sloppily, and I'll just let them sit for a while, and I'll go back to them. And sometimes I'll just like work these poems over and over again, and they just won't come together, and time will go by, and they just won't come together. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, wait a minute, if I put this one on top of this one, and I cut that out, but when I mix my poetry together, it's usually when I'm the most happy with them. Probably because it's like so many different facets of myself coming together, you know, the multiplicity of people. Yeah, my favorite writers would be Larry McMurtry, Bukowski, Garrison Keillor. Recently just discovered this guy, Scott McClanahan. He did a book called Crapalacia and Hill Williams. He's unreal. For the longest time, Hamlin Rye by Bukowski was like my all-time favorite, up there above everything else. And it was the first book, and Crapalacia knocked it right down to second. And that was an awesome feeling. But then everything I've read in the past month has kind of sucked. So, because of that book, I blame that book for it.
Yeah, I hear that. I feel like I read Fangirl by Rainbow Roll in December, and it was the only book I can remember, like, since I was a really little kid, where I finished it, turned it over, and started it again immediately. And everything else has sucked since then. I'm like kind of mad at her. I'm like ready to drive to Nebraska and be like, what's wrong with you? Write more stuff faster. In terms of poetry, I always return to Thomas Lugg's, who is one of his collected poems, which is like 1974 to 1994, some weird period, was one of the first books of poems that I typed out. And this is a thing I do. Like, if I like something and I want to figure out how it works, this is like the kid who like breaks apart clocks to like see how they work, I'll type it out, the whole thing. And his was the first one, and so I returned to that a lot. When I was writing a series of poems that were like reimagining Jane Eyre as being in a sub-dom relationship. Yeah, for real. I didn't read any of those tonight. I retyped all of Jane Eyre.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you just get it. It's out there. I mean, it's public domain. You can get it on Project Gutenberg or whatever, and so I just print it off and like retype the whole thing. Which is a really interesting way to like see what's happening kind of underneath. You know, like when you're focused on plot, you're like, what happens next? When you have to actually type out the next word, you're focused, you're like, why did she use that word? It's kind of a violent word. And, you know, then you end up with a series of poems about a sub-dom relationship. Jane Eyre. Right, yeah. I probably could have done it faster if I wanted to like drive myself completely nuts, but I did a chapter a day and there's something like 50 chapters or something. I don't know how many chapters there were. There were a lot of chapters, but it was a couple months worth of me just like, I would type a chapter in the morning, it would take me like 30 or minutes or so, and then, because they're pretty short chapters, they're quick.
It's like artists when they copy old masters.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where I got the idea, because I went to school for visual art, and we used to, like, I still do this. I will get a painting and just recopy it. It ends up being a meditative exercise rather than a creative one. It's getting to the same place. Anybody else?
Other questions?
Yeah.
I'm going to describe yourself as a storyteller. That's how you really see yourself. How do the two of you see yourselves in terms of who you are as artists?
As artists?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the storytelling element. I'm kind of a ham. I like attention. And there is an element of like intentional kind of comedy. Like I look up to comedians. Like I wish that's what I wanted to do. I'm most comfortable most myself while writing, but whenever I see a comedian get up there and perform, or get to that point in his career where he's performing but also saying pretty profound stuff, kind of riffing, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty pure.
I don't know. I do agree that there's like this performative aspect to writing. For me, it's like, oh, you dig this thing out, and it's an expression of something you experienced, and then you want to throw it at people and be like, this is me. It's kind of like an elaborate game of dodgeball. I don't know. Like I write in all different genres. So I have a book of poems, obviously, and that was what I went to my MFA for, but I was really lucky in that I went to UW-Madison for my MFA, and it's, when they were putting together the program, because it's not that old, they wanted to have it be a dual genre MFA, where you'd go and you would do fiction and poetry. And the only reason that it's not, the only reason that it's not is because, one of the faculty on staff made a good case for, well, if you're a novelist, you can't be dividing your attention like that. You might be able to pull it off as short story writer, poet, and do both of them, but if you're a novelist, you kind of got to hunker down for those 2 years and make the novel happen. And so they have it separated, but anybody who's not actively working on a novel does multiple genres. So I took workshops in everything. I did creative nonfiction, I did fiction, poetry, and so I just think I'm a writer. I just slap that on it. I make things out of words. That's what it is. But I started off as a visual artist. I don't know, I think there's just something about expression that is important, and there's something about connecting with other people over something you made that is more eloquent than just a conversation usually is. Because what I'm hoping to do when I talk to somebody is to basically do some kind of Vulcan mind meld and have them understand the whole experience. I don't want to tell you about my Thanksgiving dinner if you're gonna edit that. And when I say mashed potatoes, think of your grandmother's mashed potatoes piece. I don't want you to think that. I want you to understand my experience of mashed potatoes. So this is this Sisyphean project to force language to describe an experience so perfectly that it's like telepathy. Which is
good. I like that a lot.
all right. So,
So to answer your
yeah,
question,
there's
I'm
that.
hoping she thinks of herself.
I'm a Vulcan. I told you I'd make up answers.
Are there any?
Actually, when you talked about the mashed potatoes, I did think about other mashed potatoes.
Yeah, you do, right? Right? This is something Thomas Luck said. He says, when I say barn, you think of your own barn. You don't think of my barn. How to control that. That's what every quote is after. Control that.
Well, I didn't actually think of my own mashed potatoes. I was thinking about Justin's mashed potatoes.
The yellow ones?
Oh, and why were they yellow? What was in there?
Butter.
Just a lot of butter.
So much butter. It's a lot of butter. It's a Grimble family thing. They like it. The Grimble family likes some butter. I got nothing to say.
Case closed.
I know what she's talking about in terms of that, and I go back and forth on that, where like, sometimes when I'm writing, especially if I'm writing something that I find to be beautiful, to be honest, especially when I write sex, I'm usually like, all right, gotta get specific. Gotta make them think exactly what I was thinking in my head that moment. But often I also find it to be kind of gratifying to just kind of let go a little bit and kind of be like, you know, it's kind of cool if they are just going to be imagining their own things a lot of the time, or some weird warped version of what I'm putting out there. So that's kind of exciting in a weird way when I'm talking about certain moms or certain mashed potatoes. People are imagining something like, you didn't realize it was yellow because of the butter. I know why you were thinking it was yellow.
I suspected it, butter, I just
You know.
wasn't sure.
Yeah, no. So I agree fully, but also I find that, you know, it's a weird element of writing. And I used to draw comics initially. I guess all three of us started out as visual artists. And that was something that was really frustrating always, was that like I kind of got annoyed with that. I was like, man, I gotta draw this mountain now. I was like, I wish I could just say mountain. And then, oh, mountain. But anyway, that's that.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you guys all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're going to need to come back next month when I will read this letter from Bonk to the entire world. Let's give these guys a great
You guys look for